I would like to keep the headphones on because it makes it easier for me.
Well, go right ahead. That's fine. I normally don't have that because I just throw mine off to the side. And also, most people I interview have a studio, but it's not an audio studio, so they don't have studio headphones.
Well, I do live streams and stuff.
Yeah, so it works out, or at least plays in your favor.
Yeah, and I used to record music too, so that's part of it.
Yeah, I normally don't have people that say they used to record music.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people draw the distinction of former in this case. It's either like, yeah, I make music or I don't. Most in my experience, that's what most people would say.
For me, it's significant because ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be a rock star, and
because who doesn't?
Well, but I took it a little further than most. So I played guitar and wrote songs all through my teen years and then my 20s, and I worked at a guitar shop for about 5 years in my 20s. And I really tried. I mean, I wrote a lot of songs and performed a lot, and I got really disillusioned and jaded about that. And so when I started doing visual art, I kind of just let it fall by the wayside. So, yeah.
All right, so you saw me hit the record button a second ago, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I sometimes I just like people don't notice, or I just do it in some way when they're looking off somewhere else. So my name is Thomas Zachary. This is the KAAMP, the Knoxville Area Artist Networking Platform. This is a podcast where I hope people can discover their next favorite local artist if they choose to listen in the first place. Today is December 27th, 8th, something like that. And I know I've said it a couple times already this year, but this is legit the last recording of 2021. The world is funny, and sometimes things slip out of reach. And this has been one of those things. I've been trying to wrangle you to get in front of my microphone for 4 or 5 months now, since
it's been
August,
a long time, and it's my fault. It's my fault that we haven't been able to connect. So.
Well, this isn't me pointing fingers. This is just me stating the obvious for the people that don't know. It's good to sit here on your front porch and enjoy the sights and sounds, and hopefully y'all get to enjoy some of the sounds as well, because there's birds and light rain and all kinds of glorious outdoor noises that we get to enjoy right now. Friend, if you will introduce yourself. Tell us your pronouns if you got some. Tell us what kind of art you make. Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm Arthur Hatton. People just call me Arthur. And I use he, his pronouns. And I am a visual artist. I use mostly watercolor. I do some egg tempera. And that's what I've been doing today, actually. I pulled that out for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, I saw that earlier today, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's kind of a little bit of an experiment, but hopefully the rain isn't too loud.
Well, if it is, so be it.
I kind of like it.
We're outside.
I kind of like it.
It's better than the occasional motorcycle or loud truck noise that I get when I set up outside. So
yeah. It's not an urban sound. We're definitely out in the country. You might even hear a mooing cow at some point.
I did see plenty of livestock on the way out
here. Yeah. So I've done egg tempera, and that's partly because I was trained in iconography, Eastern Orthodox iconography, which uses egg tempera traditionally. So I learned how to do that, and now I just pull it out every now and then, just when I have a lot of free time. Because egg tempera is a really tedious medium.
Is that medium's exclusive with that topic because that's what would have been used back in the day, so to speak?
Yeah. So do you mean it's traditionally the medium of choice for iconographers because pre-Renaissance that was the medium.
That's the question I'm asking.
Yeah. But they've the style developed in such a way that it still is the right medium for iconography. You can use acrylics, but yeah, most real quote unquote iconographers still use egg.
And is that because the white itself just takes pigment so well and okay, so I'll stop making assumptions. Please tell me why this works best for this.
Yeah. No, it's fine. So you can't blend with egg tempera, but you can put down a lot of layers so one after the other. So you'll put down a base layer, and then you'll put down another layer, and a layer. And so the style of putting kind of highlights on top of darks is very kind of signature for that style. And there's a religious theological significance too. So the idea is like you're painting with light. So you start with a really dark, muted base, and then each layer kind of enlightens the figure. So yeah,
that makes sense for religious context.
Yeah, in that context, it makes a lot of sense.
So does the tempera play on itself so if you lay it down a new layer on top of the previous layer, does it mess with the previous layer that much? Does it rehydrate in any way?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. It does. Well, if you pass quickly, then it doesn't disturb the lower layer. But if you pass over a previous layer and wet it and then keep scrubbing at it, it will pull up the lower layer. So there's kind of a finesse to it.
Yeah. The finesse is one of those things that I like to poke at the context and see where it lies, because no matter what you're using, there's a finesse to it.
Yeah.
It's just if the person I'm talking to has discovered it and knows enough to play with it or not. And that's just one of those things where you're just like, well, shit, I can make it do the thing I need it to do right now. And if I do this other thing, it's just, off in the wind and it's ruined. There's that thin line. It's fun to discover.
When you're starting out with egg tempera, it'll make you want to toss it off a cliff. I mean,
I've almost done that.
Yeah, really?
Second story window.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's enraging. But once you figure it out and kind of work with it, then it can work in your favor.
That is probably, from things you can use a brush with, that's probably one of the things I've used the least. And that's right above or right below watercolor on the list, depending on how you want to sort this list. Mm-hmm. And I see you use watercolors all the time masterfully. And it's one of those things where if I were to lay in bed thinking about things at night that make me jealous, then that would be one of the
watercolor?
things. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, so I started painting watercolor, believe it or not, because some iconographers told me that was really the best teacher for egg, because even though it's kind of reverse, like you have to think about the ground of it. So the ground is white and it kind of shines up through the layers. And so it's the same thing with watercolor. So you have to think about how many layers you've put down, and each kind of accretion or layer changes, I guess, the opacity between you and the ground. So
right. And I really appreciate how you present your process with the watercolors. Mm-hmm. You show people a lot of the layers and the difference between layer 3 and layer 4, 5, 6. And, I think that distinction is very important, because you'll see a lot of people when they present their workflow, here's the first, 2-3 hours of my workflow, and then here's the last 2 or 3, and there's not a whole lot of in between, but the distinction is important. And I feel a lot of people forget that.
Well, I think that plays well for like Instagram, where you want to have like this punchy, like here's the first few seconds and then like poof, and then you've got this final amazing thing. But
true.
I just like, when I make a video of my process, like I like to watch it. It seems really relaxing to me. So just seeing it kind of slowly build. And
yeah, you do a lot more still shots, and my workflow is a bit more continuous. So I use time lapses if I'm trying to document more often than not. And still shots will be at the beginning or when I stop, or at the end. So the difference in these workflows is entertaining to me. Yeah. So I like seeing the difference in the different ways it can be illustrated. No pun intended. I enjoy watching time lapses of lots of things, not just artistic stuff, but when people can lay down a really well put together time lapse about whatever it is they're working on, I'm just like, yes.
Yeah.
I'd like cheer them a little in my head, because there's, on the backside of making that medium adjacent to the medium you're trying to make, you also have the envelope of skills that are, videography, and then actually editing if you need to, and then if you're going to put a score music to it, then so be it. There's a whole other arena of skills one must at least dabble in to get this stuff right.
Yeah, I could do time lapses, but it's just so tedious, and I'm so impatient. Just my temperament is just not well suited for that stuff. So,
but you seem to have a temperament of a saint at times. So to hear you say that is also entertaining to me. The contradiction is the entertaining part.
I guess I'm an enigma. I don't know. I am a really so. One thing about me that I didn't mention, I am a psychologist by day, and I do mindfulness meditation groups as part of my practice. So I do groups at UT for the students. And I tell them, a lot of people say, oh, I can't do meditation because I can't sit still.
I feel like that's a really common one.
Yeah. I can't sit still. I can't make my mind go blank. And I tell them, if I can do it, you can do it. Because I might not come across this way, but I'm an incredibly high-strung person internally.
You definitai don't. That's not outwardly visible. So you do a really good job.
I seem like a hippie, probably, I know, but internally, I'm just like, I know it's a podcast, but my son, one time he came to me and he said, "Hey, Dad, I look like you," and he was bouncing his leg up and down like this. I said, "Okay, yep.
Got me. Nailed it.
Yeah.
I'm also guilty of such fidgets.
So
there's that. So I guess I can lay into the normal bit of questions now. What started your creative journey? Like where did you pick up a brush or a pencil at first, in your childhood or wherever it may be?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this morning because I was anticipating you coming over, and I was just like, when did I get started? Because I only started painting in earnest. Like, I am going to learn how to do art in 2017 or so. Maybe 2016. And that was just at the end of grad school. I was just like, okay, in grad school, it's just like you work so many hours and you never give yourself a break. And it was winding down, and I was telling myself, okay, if I took all this energy and just put it into something that's for my own benefit, what would it be? And I was sick of music at that time, so it's like, I'm going to learn how to paint. And part of it was, this might sound funny, but I wanted original artwork, but I couldn't afford to buy it. So I was like, I'll just try to make it and see how to make it.
Yeah, sounds great. I have a parallel in my creative desire in the fact that I really like making things that I've never seen before.
Oh, yeah.
Regardless of the end product being expensive or inaccessible, whatever, that's irrelevant to me. It's, have I seen this before or not? This arrangement, this shape, this combination of whatever's. If the answer is no to any of those questions, then there's a fire under my ass. Just I got to do it now, because if I don't make it, I'll never see it. I can't trust anybody else to do this for me. I have to do it.
I relate to that to an extent. I mean, when I watch somebody do something and it looks cool to me, I'm like, I want to do that. I mean, even when I was a musician, I loved the Beatles. I love prog musicians and all these musicians, and when I see them on stage playing, I'm like, I want to do that.
Right.
I want to be up there. I'm still like that 3-year-old that's just like, I want to do it.
No, let me do it.
Yeah, let me do it. Yeah. I feel like I never really lost that.
That's awesome. So kudos on that.
Yeah. It makes my wife just puzzled, because she's just satisfied watching somebody do something. But for me, it's just like, no, I got to do it. So anyway, so I was thinking, okay, so when did I really start drawing? And I really did start drawing ever since I was little. I loved Calvin and Hobbes. That was just one of my favorite things. And I wanted to draw little comics and cartoons. And so I started out drawing those. And I would do little comic strips or cartoons just on my notes.
Whatever free scrap of paper you had close at hand.
Yeah. And I liked doing portraits even when I was younger, and I've always been fascinated with faces and expressions and bodies and stuff. And so I always loved seeing if I could hit that, if I can get the pieces of the face right, it looks like the person.
Right.
I love that likeness, that zone of likeness where, if you're a centimeter off on the eye, it doesn't look like the person anymore, but somehow if you get the elements right, it looks like the person. And so I don't know. I know I'm a psychologist, but I don't know what's going on in your brain.
The uncanny valley. You try to...
Yeah. that this cingulate gyrus angle. I don't know. It's been a while since I studied brain, but there's one part of your brain that recognizes faces. And that's the part of your brain that sees faces in like outlets and the front of a car and stuff.
There's I don't know if it's an affliction or what you would call it, but there's a syndrome that has been named that details, it describes that you're one of those people that sees faces in inanimate objects and in places where there aren't designed to be faces.
Yeah, that's true. And for my job as a psychologist, I do study faces and I'm looking at expressions and body language. And so I spend a lot of my time staring at people's faces, really, as my job. So I love faces. I know that sounds bizarre, but
are they always, when you see a face, is it the whole thing or is it the parts? Because you're describing the parts and how they meet the whole, but how do you look at them when you're looking at them?
Yeah. I've never thought about this. Let me think about it.
Yay, original questions.
Well, I think when you start out as a portrait artist, you lose the forest for the trees, and so you are focused on like this eye and then this eye and then the nose.
Right.
That's where I think a lot of beginner portrait artists mess up, because you've got all these, even if they're well-drawn elements, if they're not in the right arrangement, they're not going to work. So I think over time, there's a train.
Yeah.
Huh. Wow.
We can hear that real well.
Yeah, I usually don't hear that, so that's interesting.
Train noises, everybody. You're welcome.
Yeah. So I think over time, I look more at shapes. I remember you interviewed Carol Lockmiller, and I listened to that interview, and she and I look at faces kind of similarly.
I wish I had another hour to sit down and talk with her, because I would really like to pick her brain about what happens between that like aha moment and getting what you feel needs to come out of your fingers because she if you haven't listened, she's a synesthete, and she paints what she sees in her mind when she listens to music or watches a movie or any of those kind of things when she consumes media. And that aspect of being a human, just across, all the things that encompasses being human, I think is so much fun to talk about, because everybody has a different experience of themselves inside their head, and that one I can really relate to. So out of a lot of the people I've interviewed so far, like she pulls the things out of her head more accurately than most people I've ever met in my artistic journeys.
She's really intuitive and insightful, yeah. So when I heard her describing the process, I was kind of like, okay, I kind of relate to that, because I am looking at zones of the face and planes and regions. But she takes it to another level, because she's seeing colors and it's not the way that I know this podcast isn't about her, but she would laugh if she heard this or when she hears this, but you can just run a Photoshop filter through an image and get kind of like a posterized zones, but she takes it to another level. The colors she's seeing are so different that you can't simulate that with an AI or something. It's just so unique. I really like, and I like her as a person. She's nice. So
yeah, I enjoyed my conversation in an hour or so we spent, on each side of the microphone. But yeah, the way she ends up executing her work is very detailed, and it would be hard to replicate in any other fashion. From what I can tell in the digital skills that I have, I would hate to try and sit down and do that on the computer. It would be no fun. For me, at least. I'm sure someone would enjoy it, but that person's definitely not me. So, kid, pencils, paper, watercolor. What was the first thing? Was it just pens and pencils and markers and all the normal stuff?
Yeah, pens and pencils, and I did a little acrylic stuff, and I liked watching Bob Ross, and so I kind of imitated what he was doing. Like the trees with the little
yeah, with the fan brush and whatnot.
Yeah. But then I remember as a teenager, it was really deliberate, because I was thinking, okay, I can't focus on art and music at the same time, and so what am I going to do? And it was music. And so then I just started writing songs, and I was playing instruments and trying to figure out how I was going to do that and go to school and all that stuff. So yeah, then it kind of fell by the wayside for a little bit.
would you say in your experience as a creative person, music scratched the same itch, or was just the thing you were doing then / nowish? Like, was that, you chose to do that? Was that because it was more fulfilling, or is it just the thing you chose to do?
It does. So does it scratch the same itch? It's a Venn diagram. Where the shared elements are, I still like thinking about people and how they think and expressing myself and making observations about the world. And so those things are going to be the same, but music, it does activate kind of a different part of your brain, and, it's the rhythms, and something about the catchiness of it isn't replicated for me with art. So I can look at a painting and walk away, and it kind of has an effect on me, but I hear a song, and then that earworm is stuck in there for hours and hours.
The earworms.
That's a different process.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well, but that seems like a different thing, where you're craving kind of a catchiness that sticks in your head that I don't get from art.
So on the flip side of that, creating media, do aspects or traits of a piece of music or a picture you're trying to paint, do those stick in your head until they're practiced out? Because it happens to me.
Not in the same way. So if you experience that part, so I will say that when I'm engaged in creating a piece, I do get into that zone, and then it's hard for me to get out of it. And so today, like when I got lunch, I was in the middle of painting, and I went in and threw peanut butter on a piece of bread, and then went right back out, and I can't stop until the piece is done.
Yeah.
So there is that single-mindedness that happens.
So in my experience being a creative person, I get pictures in my head, and they don't stop being in my head, and the longer they sit between my ears, the more disruptive to my everyday thought patterns they become, until I either get supremely frustrated with it, and it just invades anything that happens in my brain in the course of a day, or I will say everything short of manifesting as physical pain, because it's an intense physical feeling that I have when I need to draw or create or sketch something, when I need to get an idea out of here and out of my fingertips. It's almost a physical pain. It's a sensation that I feel. I won't say pain, but it's definitely a physical sensation that I feel in myself, that it tells me that I need to do something. There's a frustration or a drive there that I got to do this, and the longer I don't do the thing, the more perturbed the idea gets at me for not letting it out.
And that's interesting, because the work you do is pretty abstract, but it's intricate too. So are you seeing the pictures in your mind? Are you seeing the patterns?
Sometimes, yeah, and it's not the same for every piece. Sometimes, if it's a radially geometric piece that I'm working on, I'll usually see no more than half of it. If I see a shape, it'll be a segment of the radial whole. Okay. I'll have, a sixth of a 60-degree pattern, or I'll have, if it's a square pattern, I'll have that 90-degree section of it, and I'll see that, and I'll get that down, and I work through it in process, all the way around until I get to done, essentially, with the pattern and with the radialness of the pattern. And those are the ones that are most often bugging me. But the more surrealist things that I do come to me as whole images most of the time. They just
interesting. Okay.
They just flash into my head. The piece I gave my sister and her fiance for Christmas, I started in October at a show at the Outpost because I was doing a live painting, and I wanted to do something more surrealist. So I wanted to do a sunset, which is, nearly cliche in a lot of mediums, but that's not something I do very often because of what I make. So I had this idea. I knew the colors I wanted. I knew the composition. So all I had to do was get it out of my brain and on this canvas. And I got everything done except the sun and the sunbeams themselves. And it sat there for 3 months until this previous Friday morning, and then I took an hour and painted the sun onto the backdrop of the sunset that I'd already painted, and then it was done. Took me 3 months for my brain to click and make that happen, but that morning I woke up and I was just like, that's it, that's the thing, I gotta do it before I forget about it. Oh God.
Oh, it's so interesting. Yeah, I don't experience it like that. For me, especially with watercolor, it's just like I have an urge to create, and that can be overwhelming, but it's never that concrete. It's just, I just feel like I don't want to sit around. I want to do something.
Well, I have that, but it's far less often than the other two examples. Okay. And, being the creative person that we are, it's like, sometimes you got that, you want to do something, but like, what do you do? Yeah. And at that point, it's an exercise of the process for me, instead of just, like, well, I feel like I should sit down and draw something, so I'm just going to sit down and draw something. Like that's when I exercise the process.
It's more of a discipline.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I know that my workflow and how I do my geometric pinstripey things is good for my mental health. And there are days where I don't have an image burning to get out of my head. And it's good to sit down for 2 or 3 hours and work on something, because it quiets my mind. I get to practice an art form that I enjoy, all those things. And those days are also good days. I just don't have an end goal inside, like I don't have a shape I need to make, or, I'll just sit down and be like, well, whatever happens, happens, but trust the process kind of ordeal. So those days happen for me, but far more rare than other days where I have an end goal or a very defined starting idea. And the discipline of it is also important, and I'm sure you're very disciplined in how you do your workflow, because I feel like it would be very difficult for you to achieve such things if you did not have some degree of discipline in your workflow.
Yeah, and so there's always something that you can paint or do. So yeah, I do try to stay routine, and I use social media to keep myself accountable in that sense. So it's just like, so there is a sense of like, I want to keep going, I want to do something, and a lot of times it's driven by dissatisfaction with the last thing that I did. So.
I don't often suffer that, but I understand the feeling.
Yeah, no, that's more of a driving factor than anything. It's just like, I'll finish something, and I'm like, it's okay, but I can do better than that. So then I have to do another thing, and it's more of me competing with myself, I guess.
I usually have that concern when I set out to do a series. I'm just like, man, it's going to do 5 or 6 of these. And then like number 6 comes. I'm like, damn it.
Yeah.
And then, I guess I'm on to number 7 now. And then that one goes to the trash. You know.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I'm constantly like really dissatisfied with what I'm doing. So that's a big thing. That's probably not a mentally healthy thing. I don't know.
Well, I feel as if you have the tools to combat such things. Yeah.
I mean, as a psychologist, I try to be really mindful of what I'm thinking and what I'm doing, and try not to be too critical. But even when my mind gets pretty critical, I just kind of acknowledge that, because that's the part of your brain that really just wants you to do better and improve yourself. And as long as you don't feed that beast too much, it can be a healthy part of, I guess, what you're doing.
Yeah, I really try not to rake myself over the coals, except when I mess up in such a way that it forces me to replicate the mess up in the rest of the pattern. Oh God. Like if I accidentally just, drop the end of the paintbrush on the canvas right here, that means sometimes I have to do it 11, 12, 16 other places. And I'm just like, Interesting. So I get critical of my mistakes in that way, because then I'm forced to make it look intentional.
Yeah, there's a Miles Davis quote about that, where it's just like, if you make a mistake in the first verse, just do it in the second verse, and they'll just think you did it on purpose the first time.
Yeah, I've heard similar notions about writing music. Make it sound intentional by repeating.
Yeah,
it works out, and it also works in geometric artwork as well. So whatever, it works out.
All right, cool.
What? More train noises.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Where else have you put your creative energy artistically speaking, outside of music, traditional artistic mediums, have you played with, clay? Have you sculpted? Any additive processes? Any of those kind of things?
That's a good question. I have dabbled in a couple things, but like I've done a couple. This sounds off the wall, I guess, but there's a Mexican tradition of creating nichos, which are little boxes with like kind of dioramas inside with different saints and icons and stuff. And I'm not Roman Catholic, but I've made a couple of those because I thought the concept was interesting. And I've done a little bit of wood carving because I like watching wood carving. I just wanted to try it, which is not additive. It's famously subtractive. Yeah.
Well, that was probably a word that isn't best suited for the question I was trying to ask. I'm just really used to additive processes when I play with robots. So there's that.
But I will say that generally I'm a creative person. And so anything I'm doing, I usually, when I'm at work, I shouldn't tell on myself, but I like to make little like prank labels to put on things. And so there was one year when we lost a couple psychologists who had quit and taken other jobs, and so there were 2 empty offices next to mine, and so
you couldn't resist, could you?
Yeah, so I replaced the door labels. One was Counselor Deanna Troy, and then Dr. Fraser Crane, and then there's a trash can somewhere that says bottles and cans, and so I made a sign that said "Just clap your hands." So yeah, my coworkers are always sometimes finding little notes that I've created or joke things. I just approach life very creatively, or I'm just trying to make some new thing. I get really restless otherwise.
Yeah, every now and again we'll find in my professional environment. I work around and with a lot of tools that aid themselves and to making ridiculous things. And every now and then we'll find a ridiculous sticker or label or something somewhere that you wouldn't have thought anybody would think to stick something. Everybody that I work with is guilty of putting some silly sticker somewhere, and then we find it and we're like, what the hell is this? Yeah. I
like that stuff. I like pranks that don't hurt anybody or humiliate people. So.
Yeah, we're a bunch of goofballs. So yeah, there's plenty of humor in my workday.
Yeah, which is good. That's good.
So music-wise, what have you done? Guitar, drums? No drums?
Not a lot of drums. Bass and some keys and guitar mostly.
Anything on the outlier of this list?
I played viola in an orchestra when I was little, and then almost into my teen years. But it wasn't really. I didn't continue it past that.
So, what are the differences in your workflow when it comes to creating visual art versus music?
Music is a whole lot more intuitive for me, and so with music I did have something a little more similar to what you're describing, where I really would just get a song that just pops into my head and then I'd write it down, or I'd have a dream or something where a melody or something would be stuck in there. I used to be in a band with another guy who wrote songs, and he was more in the discipline side, where he was just always writing songs, writing, and I would write maybe 2 a year. But after 20 years, that's a lot of songs. And I would try to just like force myself to write, but I just couldn't force writing songs. Whereas with artwork, I can. It's just like, I'm just going to paint something. And
right.
I'll just find a screenshot of something or just paint a bowl of fruit at home or something. But I couldn't do that with music. Maybe I would have been a better songwriter if I had access to that side where it was the discipline of just like the grind. But I just didn't have that part.
Did you ever try to force yourself to sit down and do that on any sort of regular basis, or did you just recognize that's how you operate?
Yeah, but it would always turn out derivative or like, oh, that's another song that I...
Sounds like something I've heard or done before.
Right. Part of the problem with music, it just feels like with popular forms of music, like a lot of things have already been said, and so 12-bar blues or standard chord progressions, you can only say so much. And the last time I recorded an album, the first song, one of the lyrics was like, I can't say anything that the Beatles or Bob Dylan didn't already say, basically. It's just we're all kind of repeating ourselves at this point.
And when you have such a huge body of work, like, where do you find the niche that you're going to dive into to make your original content? Like, in comparison to artists like that have giant bodies of work that covered, all the topics, it seems like.
Yeah. I mean, there are 7 notes, right? Or 12 notes or whatever. I mean, there are only so many, depending on, the key you're in. And so, I don't know, art just seems so more dynamic and versatile to me now. I wouldn't have thought that when I was a musician, but it just seems like there's so much more you can do and say, or at least I can, with art. So,
and that did that stifle your creativity in music at all, or did it just make you recognize that this is where you're at with your music, and then that pushed you to create more, visual art?
It did stifle me, but the other, I would say, the reason I stopped doing music was more about the fact that nobody pays for music anymore. You can't really make a very good living unless you're like a professional performance musician where you're a guitar player that just practices 8 hours a day or whatever. And so with art, within 1 year of painting, I had made hundreds of dollars, and I never broke even with music. I never even broke even. I mean, I recorded albums and I played shows, and it was painful, and just getting somebody to trying to get somebody to go to a show.
Right.
But so yeah, it's just, I don't think people, this is going to sound weird, but I don't think people value music the way they do visual art. There's Bruce Dickinson had a quote from Iron Maiden.
Yeah. Very familiar with Iron Maiden.
Oh, good.
Yes.
I mean, he said something like people would go to his shows and they would buy a $5 Monster Energy drink and sit there and drink it, but they wouldn't spend $1 on a song, buying a song from Iron Maiden.
But they'll spend $60 on a 2XL t-shirt because it's an Iron Maiden t-shirt.
Yeah, but it does. Yeah, and that is true, but it doesn't pay the bills.
Right. You can't totally live off the merch sales.
Right, and so people love music and they listen to it all the time, but I think that they're just, for some reason, not willing to fork out cash for songs. There are some, but they're anomalies, right?
Yeah.
They just stream it or get it for free somewhere.
I think marketing music these days is also really funny and probably messes with people's pocketbook, tendencies, because there's so many places that one could hypothetically listen to things for free, and then when you see a label on it that says 99 cents, why buy the cow? You got the milk kind of scenario, and that's pretty sad. But I feel like people always have a core group of artists or creative that they support, and then it just sort of watersheds away from that core group. Yeah. Especially in music, because I feel like everybody knows a musician, and then some of those people will go to as many of that person's shows as possible. And then, like, the support wanes as you get further away from that tangible experience.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, I mean, it could just be I wasn't that good, but...
No, surely not.
Well, I mean, I just never gathered that core of fans when I was a musician or songwriter. My mom knows all my songs, my sister and my best friend, and there were a few people who listened a lot, but now as a visual artist on Instagram, like, I've got people who really follow me and they care about what I'm doing, and they're willing to support me on Patreon and do other things just to hear what I have to say about things, which is incredibly validating, and it's something I never did have with music. So it really could be I'm just better at art than I ever was at music, but it could also be there's just something about the medium that it's, I don't know, that people value with their time and money differently than music.
I've never been presented the thought or had the thought cross my mind that people support different mediums in different ways. Like if I'm a fan of X, I'm probably going to be the same degree of fan of Y and everything else, but I'm not everyone, and that makes perfect sense because people have preferences, and I just forget that sometimes. So that I'll have to remember that.
Yeah, I don't know what to account for that other than it's just the medium matters, I guess. How people consume it, where they can get it. So, yeah.
I also feel as if portraiture itself is so immediately tangible as an artistic output, as context for artistic expression, and as content itself, because you have a face, I have a face. Most people we know have faces, and most people we know also spend a lot of time in their day looking at other people's faces. So I feel like there's a lot of common ground that is already established and concrete, when someone looks at a piece of portraiture. And if you aren't looking at a piece of portraiture, maybe there's a metaphorical bridge you need to build to the context or subject matter of this piece of art. So I feel like that goes a long way, especially if it's good portraiture.
I think another part of it is doing art on social media makes so little of a demand on a person. So if I say, hey, I wrote a song, listen to this, I just took 5 minutes of your day.
Yeah.
But if I post something on Instagram, you look at it for a second and hit like and then move on. And so I've made a lot less of a demand on you, and the stakes are lower, because if I say, hey, here's a song I wrote, and you sit there for 5 minutes, it's not very good. It's just like, man, you just wasted 5 minutes.
I'm never getting those back.
Yeah, I know. And there are a lot of really bad songs out there where even a bad painting, you can just say, oh, that's cool, and then just move on. So there is that part of it. I mean, maybe art is cheaper, and therefore I mean, consuming art is cheaper. It just takes a second of your day versus 5 minutes of your day. I don't know.
I've discovered that it's harder for people to see the value in things that are more abstract because they don't understand why it has value in the first place. Like, if you were to set a piece of your work and a piece of my work on a wall, same price tag, side by side, I feel as if my abstract, geometric, psychedelic, whatever you want to call it, which I try not to label it because it just is what it is, and then you have your portraiture on the wall, I feel as if yours would sell first because it's tangible. There is there's more established connection between the person standing and viewing and the subject matter on the canvas, because you can relate to a picture of someone more than you can relate to a picture of whatever the hell that is.
So I would have guessed the opposite, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I just would assume that like something abstract or geometric is more universal, whereas with portraits, if you know the person and you're a fan of that thing, so if I do like a celebrity and somebody's a fan, they'll want to buy it. But if you don't know who it is and you don't know why it's special, like, you don't care. I
would love to do this. Like
as an experiment?
Yes. Yeah, I would love to do this.
But also with portraiture, like portraiture can be an art form in itself where you don't need to know who the person is. If the composition's good,
right,
and the expression is relatable, then it would sell probably. But a lot of the stuff I do is either really niche-y or it's a painting of someone I know, and unless you have like an emotional investment in that person, maybe it wouldn't sell. I don't know. Or maybe it's all the same. I don't know.
I don't know. We can double blind this, I'm sure, somehow. I'm not willing to design the experiment.
Yeah.
I'm just happily stating that I would enjoy watching.
Yeah.
But from selling my artwork for the past, 7 or 8 years, and being in the same area as people that do similar things as what you do, I've noticed certain trends of buyers. Is what I'm saying, I suppose. But I still sell things. Everybody else still sells things. So at the end of the day, it's not a big deal. It's just a funny bit of friction that I've noticed in trends with people and their money.
Well, fan art sells really well.
It does.
I'll say if I like something and I paint it and I put it on Reddit in the subreddit for that thing, it'll sell.
It gets eat up.
Yeah, so that's kind of seductive as an artist to target that.
And I've done the same thing. Like, there are lots of unusual and psychedelic artwork subreddits out there that I frequent and have posted in, and some of those posts are my most upvoted posts in my Reddit history. So that's great. Nobody cares that my opinions are posted on the internet. They just want to see those pretty pictures. So it's fine.
But I shouldn't say that, like, the pop art I do, it's not so calculated. I'm not doing it because it sells, or else I would do dog portraits, right?
Right. Because those are surefire.
Yeah, I mean,
people love dog portraits.
If you can do dog portraits, God bless you.
I've done one my entire life, and it was a gift.
Yeah, I've done a couple just as gift for people, but I shouldn't even mention that because then people ask me to do it.
Hey, Arthur, will you do me a dog portrait? Here's a picture of my dog.
I'm not that. I don't.
People are going to start sending pictures of their dog when you request reference the way you do.
Somebody already did. Yesterday.
They beat us to it.
It was actually a good picture. But anyway. No, I think, like, okay, I love pop art and I like Andy Warhol, but I like to do it as, for me, it really is an artistic expression. And so, I have a friend who says something about, like, calling it commercial art, and I don't think it's commercial art. I like to do, like, get an expression from a TV show or, like, a scene that's kind of a little obscure.
I really like how you pull the screenshots as inspiration from SNL.
Yeah.
Because you really get, like, that moment when somebody,
Yeah.
You like to pull those very expressive, very contorted, like, those tense moments.
I love those. Just those really, my family's home. Those really...
We can hit pause if you
No,
like.
it's right. Fine. I don't care. They're just my kids.
All right, whatever.
No, I love finding those moments, but it's funny. So, like, for instance, I did a painting of Jan from The Office from the dinner party episode. It's really famous, but it was a screenshot nobody had ever memed before or anything, and I thought it was cool. And I painted it, and I put it online, and it got really popular. And then somebody else said, "Oh, you should do an Office series." I was like, "What? Why would I do that? What do you think that I'm doing right now?"
Right.
Because I'm not doing an Office series. I like doing faces. And so TV shows are a great place to do faces that are emotionally evocative, but I'm not...
And they're usually pretty well lit being on set.
Yeah, great lighting, great expressions, people who are trained in doing facial expressions, but I'm not doing fan art that's a series of Office things. That's not what I'm doing.
That is not why you sat down to make that piece.
Right. I'm not Office painting guy.
Right.
I'm just a guy that likes some pop art.
That's the thing you wanted to paint.
Yeah.
Not like I'm going to paint.
Is that pretentious? Does that come across as really pretentious?
I don't know, because I have the same point of view. Like, if I see something and I want to recreate it in my hand, I don't care. If someone's like, "Well, why'd you do it this way? You should do more of those." Like, I did it this way because that's how I wanted to do it.
So do you have the same thing as me, where it's just like, as soon as it becomes an obligation or an expectation, you don't want to do it anymore? Or are you okay cranking out kind of the same thing? If people like it, you're okay keeping...
I've found this to be a really touchy subject in my creative output, because I'm not, like, retroactively spiteful in the way that I'm just like, "Oh, they like it, I can never do this again." If I have the opinion that I like it and then other people also like it, I'm far more likely to do another one, but not because they like it.
Okay.
It's because I like it, I made it, it just happened to be well received.
Okay, yeah.
I could really care less. I don't create for other people. I very much enjoy when other people like my creative output, but in no way, up until I decide that it is worthy of being shared, does their opinion matter.
And, that's such a luxury. And if you're listening and you're an artist where you're paying the bills with art and you have to do houses or dogs or whatever, God bless you, keep on trucking. But I'm just so glad that I don't have to be that person that, is doing marketing research and trying to paint the thing
what
that's gonna
SEO
sell.
tags do I need to put
Oh my
on
gosh, that stuff kills me. I hate it. And I still have, going back to that theme of just, I am that 3-year-old toddler where it's just like, hey, Arthur, you should paint this. And I'm like, you're not the boss of me. I'm not going to do that. I get this really defiant, like, I don't know. And that's why I don't really love doing commissions either. I'm very, I don't know, free-spirited. Again, I don't want to sound too pretentious, but
Now, as I've gotten older, I'm 30 years old, as we sit right now, today. I started taking my creative expression seriously when I was like 21, 22. And from the get-go, I recognized my workflow or creative practice was first and foremost a healthy practice for me. Now, beyond that, great. If you want to give me money for it, cool. But I've never set out to be creative for the end goal of monetary gain. Now, I've been commissioned pieces, and of course, you get paid for that and all that stuff. As artists generally get, the opportunity to do so. But it's never been one of those things where I've sat down like, I'm gonna paint a painting and it's gonna make me money. I've never had that. My expression has always been something for my positive emotional mental benefit, because I recognized after I started this ordeal that this is a practice of mine that is helpful for me. And if I attach any other context to it in a way that it becomes mutually exclusive with that practice, then it's out the window. Like, it does not benefit me in the same way, because I'm not using the discipline in the same way. So I have to do it for me first and foremost. I mean, regardless of whether it's a commission or it's a gift or, whatever that may be, how the piece comes to me or comes about is fine. But the workflow is still for my health. And I have to keep it that way, or else I become like bitter and disillusioned and, all the negative things that one can suffer when you're not focusing on the art itself.
So part of that was a lesson that I learned probably too late, and I wish I hadn't. But, I was a pretty depressed teenager, and I really leaned into that tortured artist concept. And so I didn't think of creativity as something that was healthy. I really glamorized kind of just like, and maybe this is a rock star thing, but just like that, I'm going to be super depressed and I don't want to get better because then my art will suffer or whatever. And the older that I got, and now that I'm a psychologist, I really resist that type of thinking, and I wish I hadn't wasted so many years thinking that sort of thing. Like, I have to be tortured, I have to be depressed in order to create good art. All the best artists were just like miserable, and so I have to be like that. I know too many artists that waste months and years on that attitude. I don't know why I got on the soapbox just now, but it's something I'm passionate about.
It's a worthy soapbox. I've also done that. There have been periods of my creative journey that, outside of the creative context of my life, I've suffered, intense emotional trauma, and, life, as it happens to everyone, can really suck sometimes. And then I have to remember that I have this outlet that I can't let be corrupted by whatever other bullshit can so easily corrupt the thing that I hold dear. And once that bridge was established in my mind about how I need to work and how I need to keep things separate from the work that I do for myself, I got a lot better. Like, not better as in like, my skills became more advanced. It's just that I didn't let other things rob the joy from what I chose to do. Yeah,
gosh, that is so precious. That is so precious to have that.
Well, it only took me like 4 years to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. I mean, it took me longer than that, but it's so precious to have that in your life. And I love teaching people, my kids, but also I do an art therapy group at the university, and I do it sometimes with my mindfulness groups. Like, using creativity as like a human endeavor that just is good for you. Thank you. My wife just turned on the porch light.
Some assist from the inside land.
Yeah.
Now, I don't... So, do you know who Alex Gray is?
Alex Gray, no.
Okay, so if you've ever heard of the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors, it's basically his art church.
Okay.
He's a world-renowned psychedelic surrealist artist.
Okay.
The reason I bring him up is because I fall in line with his ideology about how art and creativity is sacred, but I'm not going to sit here and build a whole church that is an art gallery, you know.
Sure.
I'm not a very religious person in the traditional aspect, but I'm going to go short of saying this is a holy practice, but it's very, very important to me as a person, how I go about my day, how I exercise my quote-unquote demons as a creative person. And so holding such respect for the creative process and understanding that it holds a significant place in your life and how it affects you, I think is something that some artists don't ever figure out, or they've got it figured out in such a way that it's not helpful for them. Like, however it happens in their head is not healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think there are a lot of artists that are conventionally religious, I think. I mean, I used to be a lot more religious. Now it's complicated, but...
It's always complicated.
But don't you sometimes feel like a conduit more than just...
Yeah, like 100%. Yeah. I have a piece sitting at the end of the hallway at my house right now that I painted late 2018 or 19, called The Conduit.
Okay.
And it is a picture of a human brain with a gap between that and a cluster of psilocybin mushrooms.
Okay, yeah.
And there's a lot of little colored particles and waves and a lot of things, and it's called The Conduit because, you know, sometimes you don't always feel as if the genesis of the idea that ended up on the canvas is 100% yours.
Yeah.
So I
almost feel weird taking credit for it because it's just like,
I sat down and I did it, you know, and I can't tell you that it's mine, but that piece is to represent when that happens, you know, to give that idea, that moment, that whatever, you know, a physical form that you can look at. And the space between synapses in the brain is how I chose to illustrate where this happens. So, you know, you got your brain and you got some magic mushrooms, and then there's a gap between, and that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
That's where one is the conduit. You know, you are the conduit, but where does that actually happen? Well, the chemistry happens in the gap. You know, the synaptic cleft. That's where the magic happens, you know, as far as brain chemistry goes. So I couldn't just leave that out. Like, that absence is what the picture is about, that space, and what happens in it.
It's so interesting. And I heard a similar sentiment. Serge Tankian.
Lead singer of System of a Down and lots of other wonderful projects. I'm very familiar with the fella.
He said something similar. It's just like, my best songs were channeled. I mean, it's just like... And Paul McCartney said a similar thing. It's just like he grew up hearing all these different songs and they get digested in his head somehow, and then suddenly he wakes up with a song. And it's just like, you just took all these elements that existed before and then they kind of just get processed, and then here's the thing that came out.
This is honestly, I'm really glad we're talking about this. This is honestly one of my favorite things I don't do as an artist, because this is a subconscious thing. Like, this isn't me actively trying to come up with whatever. This is the thing my brain presented to me. Like, this was a separate process. I had no idea that was happening until my subconscious was like, hey, dude, check this out. Look at this. What do you think?
It's something that happened to you.
Yeah, it's presented to me. Like, I had no idea that it was anything going on inside my brain other than, you know, I'm breathing, I'm eating, I'm drinking, you know, the whole 9 yards to sustain great. And then it's just like, bam, here's one of these. What do you think, dude? And, you know, like, I don't know what to do with it other than put it on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Because that's all you can do sometimes. And I greatly enjoy when this happens. because I like knowing sometimes how little control I have over what I say is my creative self. Like I very much enjoy playing or trying to play with where that line is, because the things that I channel or are given to me, or I that flow through me as a conduit, versus what I can craft with myself and my imagination and my hands. Where's the interplay between those two? I love it. That's, if I wake up and there's a picture on my mind and I've never thought about it before, I'm way more excited to sit down and work with it than most things that I come up with 100%, in my imagination.
But it's, the other interesting thing is everyone has that, and I talk to a lot of people that say I'm not creative, and I
hate when people say it's so defeatist.
It's so defeatist, and it's also false.
Yeah.
Because I'll ever say, you ever had a weird dream? And they'll say, well, yeah, I've had a weird dream. It's just like, your brain did that.
That's all you, bud.
That came out of your brain in the same way. So I think what people are really saying when they say I'm not creative is they're afraid to do something because somebody is going to make fun of them, or they're going to feel bad that they didn't do a good job. And that's legitimate. And I think that keeps people from doing a lot of things. But one of the things as a psychologist that I'd love to do is just be able to loosen those cognitions, those thoughts that like somebody's going to make fun of you, you're going to humiliate yourself. If you do it wrong, somebody's going to criticize you. Yeah, maybe, but what does that have to do with anything?
Right, like, that's totally separate of your desire and need to create or play with this idea, whatever it may be. I have to separate those things. Like, obviously, I'm so familiar with my drive to create, but being the person you see that's always presenting these things to the public, I'm also the first face that any negative feedback hits.
Right, of course,
so
yeah.
I have to sit down sometimes. Like, not everybody's going to like your shit today, and that's fine.
Yeah,
and that's honestly a thought I have probably more often than I like this thing I just made, because the polarity of it and the contrast of both of those experiences being attached to one physical object. I try to be as aware and mindful about both sides of that experience as I possibly can. Something about managing expectations, because I try to do that a lot, to my detriment sometimes. But
it's inexplicable. I mean, there are things that I've wanted to like that I just can't like, and if somebody doesn't like my stuff, it's fine. I can't hold that against you, because I've tried to get into Led Zeppelin, and for some reason it just doesn't hit me. But
you're one of those.
Yeah. But it's just like Black Sabbath. I like Led Zeppelin. For some, there are a couple songs, but whatever their fans are hearing, I can't hear it. But then I like other bands that just something sinks in, and it's inexplicable.
That's a good example, I think, because Led Zeppelin's such a popular band, like all over the world.
Yeah, and for some reason it just doesn't click. But then the Beatles I love, Black Sabbath, and Yes, and I like prog bands, and so I don't know. It's inexplicable.
So if you like Yes, do you also like Cream?
I like Cream.
Okay.
But I've seen Yes like 3 times.
So you have more of a bias.
I have a big
for the
bias.
Yes. Yeah. You're a yes man.
I'm a yes man. You're right.
Oh, goodness. I couldn't pass that one up. It hit my brain, and I wasn't going to stop it. So let's get back more to the artistic things. So is there an interplay between your professional education and your artistic do you have any formal artistic education at all?
No.
Do you have any musical instruction? Because that fits this envelope of a question as well.
No. So I was never really other than like high school art class or whatever. I did spend 1 year in my training as a psychologist. I was at Savannah College of Art and Design as a counselor. And so I met a lot of artists, and I saw kind of their process and heard a lot about their process. But I've never been formally trained, with the exception of I was trained in iconography from a couple of Russian-trained iconographers. That was just like a weird 1 week long thing with some mentorship. That's like its own thing. That's almost completely separate from the other things I do. But that's a long way to answer your question, but no formal training.
So your professional endeavors in the industry you work in and how you conduct yourself on a daily basis, do these things have any sort of direct influence on your creative output, or do they more influence the hows and the whys of your creativity?
I would say probably so I have an interest in people, and so my artistic subjects are people, and I'm a psychologist, and I like thinking about people's internal states and like getting in people's heads a little bit. And so that's like a shared thing between the portraiture and figure work that I do and the psychology that I do. That's really the only overlap, because they feel like very different endeavors. But yeah, I'm always trying to figure people out, and I think that it's not a coincidence that I chose portraiture versus abstract or landscapes or animals or whatever.
Yeah, if I hadn't known that you were a psychologist if I hadn't have learned that at the same time I'd learned you were an artist of other mediums, I wouldn't have been surprised to have learned it.
Okay, yeah. Interesting. Is that obvious then, I guess?
I wouldn't say it's that obvious. I would just say it's one of those things that's more easy for me to infer about other creative people than people that aren't creative looking at artwork. Being a creative person and knowing the front side of these things, like I think about the front side of these things more often. So, I've seen the way you frame your portraiture and how you portray your people in your work. And it looks like there's more thoughtfulness poured into it on the front end than a lot of other portraiture that I've seen. It's more about what's going on this person's face, under the skin versus, oh, look at the composition, their lighting, they're sitting in this position, they have one hard point of light from over here.
Right.
And, it's more about what's behind the face, I feel like your art is, than the composition and the elements of art and how they're presented,
That's probably true, and I'm trying to work on that. Like one of my favorite artists is named Nick Runge. He's a watercolor artist and does a lot of portraits, but he really abstractifies the face and washes the eyes out, and so you don't get that same like, what is that person feeling? It's more like, oh, that's a cool composition, and the way that he kind of makes a face recede. Whereas I always paint the eyes because that's the windows of the face, right, or whatever, however you put it.
Was it the saying, the windows to the soul?
Windows to the soul.
I don't have one of those, so it must not work on me.
A soul? Oh, yeah. Gingers.
Yes.
Okay. I don't hold that belief. I think red-haired people are valuable and good. And
thank you.
Yeah, have value as people.
I enjoy playing with stereotypes and jokes and stuff.
Okay,
so I put that on people, and it's sheerly my selfish delight because their reaction. Like, I've had some people straight up like grab my hand and start to pray. And
oh no, really?
Whew, boy, let me tell
What?
you. Yeah. And then I've also had people be like reach over and put their hand on my knee and just be like, no, that's not funny. And then I laugh in their face. Oh, it's definitely a thing.
What?
But I put stuff on people like that just to see how they'll react. Sometimes I don't care if they're strangers or not. I really don't.
Okay.
But that's something I do because I'm selfish.
I mean, one thing I found out in moving to Knoxville, you don't joke about Christianity around here. I mean, some people take it really seriously.
That being Jesus adjacent, like not having a soul. Some people get really offended, and I laugh really hard and try to walk away quicker than I walked up.
So I feel like we were talking about something that led to that, and I missed it. Oh, the eyes part.
Yes, the eyes.
So yeah, I mean, people really look at eyes.
They do.
I mean, it's magnetic, and you can infer a lot from the eyes. And now that everyone's wearing masks, even more so.
Oh, it's so funny. I love the emphasis that has been put on the distance between the bridge of someone's nose and the top of their eyebrows. Like that inch and a quarter.
And you can see people smiling at the corners of their eyes, which is a thing, and there's research behind that too. And then just like shifty eyes and evil eyes. And
so how well do you know your wife? pretty well.
I mean, okay.
Well enough to get married.
Not a trick question.
No,
or anything.
not a trick
13
question.
years. We've been married
Okay,
13 years.
so can you call her on the phone and by the way she talks knows that she is smiling?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, okay.
Of course, yeah.
There are people in my life, I know that well.
Yeah.
And I think it's wonderful because you don't even have to see them and you know that they're happy enough to smile. And I think that's, if there's that repertoire between two people, I think that's awesome.
Or they say hello and you're like, what's wrong?
Yeah. That's the
Like you
flip
can
side of
sense
the coin, yeah.
Yeah.
But I asked that question in the way that I did to pose that.
Yeah.
But I also, like I said, I just throw stuff at people.
Yeah, no, that's what you're doing here.
Yeah, and when you don't have to see something to know something, I find to be really cool. For lack of a better word, yeah, it's really cool to me. And like you said, you have to read a person from above the mask to their eyebrows now. So if you can see someone without interacting with them or across a counter or whatever, you see the squint in the corner of their eyes, you know what's happening on the rest of their face. And it's very pragmatic and also empathetic to see that on someone's face and to be able to know that as you're communicating with them, because it's difficult to communicate with random someone else, period, because you're both people and communication is difficult no matter who you are. But being able to read someone's face in such a manner is such a nice skill these days. Society has forced it upon us.
Yeah. I love that stuff. I love just being able to read a person's face. And I'm not the type of person that's just like, always know when someone's lying. Like, I don't. But I just love just reading expressions and getting into what people are thinking and feeling. And, one of the questions I get asked a lot, oh, you're a psychologist, so are you analyzing me right now? And the answer is yes, I am.
Especially since you asked.
Yeah. I can't turn it off. And everyone is. So it's not like I've cornered the market on reading people. It's just like, no, I'm just a psychologist. I just talk to people until they feel better. But yeah, that's what I do. I love it. And then it's not just portraits, it's figures too, right? So like body language is just an extension of that. So that's why I do that work as well. So faces and bodies, it's really interesting stuff to me.
You use that subject matter so well, and I use it as a form of practice to push my comfort zone. Like that's your wheelhouse as far as I can tell. But to me, that's so far removed from my wheelhouse. Like tangible, concrete things that I interact with every day, whether it be other people, objects, vehicles, whatever. The tangible things in society are not the things I generally paint, because those are not the things that run around inside my head. I like the things I've never seen before or I wouldn't encounter on a normal basis. I like the fantastical things, But I do the other things to push me out of my comfort zone, because you don't grow if you don't. And if you're not trying things, you're not growing. And, luckily I have some friends that run a Knox Draw.
Oh, yeah.
And those cats in that group have been an excellent place for me to explore my creative workflow and expand my subject matter. And I think it's an excellent practice, but it is definitely practice and occasional torture for me to draw tangible things in such a manner and so familiar as the human form. So when I see you just put it out there, I'm just like, oh man, one day I'll get there. One day.
Yeah. It's just focused practice. That's all it is. I've been to Knox Draw once and I loved it, but we have to get a babysitter in order to go, so it's
it's a little more of an ordeal. Well, living where you live here is you don't set yourself up to not be.
I like what you're doing, and I like all the little things that Knoxville has that like build a community. So there's the Pigeon Parade that I've been published in a couple times, and Amanda has done such a great job, and you've done such a great job of. I don't feel like a local musician or a local artist, either one really. Because I'm just in my house most of the time, and I go to work and then I go home and then I work, and most of the sales that I do are random people on the internet who see my stuff, and so I don't think of myself as a Knoxville artist.
Well, buddy, by my definition, you fit.
Well, yeah, I mean, I like hearing that because I don't feel like I know anybody. I don't feel like I'm part of any scene.
Well, I'll tell you, it's more geography than anything, as far as I'm concerned, because Knoxville area is, the KA and the KAAMP, and that goes from, Bristol to Chattanooga, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
I mean, obviously the core of my guests are going to be like immediately Knoxville, Oak Ridge, Maryville, Seymour, Sevierville, like that metro area. But, regional artists are not off limits as far as I'm concerned. And you can't, you got to have a little variety. So,
but it's not just geography, right? Because part of it is just like feeling like you belong to a group, which I don't.
I don't feel as if that's necessary to
Really?
be considered a local. Like, obviously, it's nice to be somewhat invested
I'm not one
in
of the cool
community.
Kids. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Well, you're a cool kid now. If this podcast and its membership is any sort of badge of cool kidness, then you've got it.
Well,
but I just, if you're here in this area and you do stuff you're passionate about, that's why I want to talk to people, because my most entertaining conversations I've ever had, microphone involved or not, have been with individuals that are super passionate about something. And I feel as if the people that are passionate about the something are the most articulate about that something. I like to talk to articulate people about the things they're passionate about, because they can explain their shit.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm asking questions, because I want to know. Like, I'm not flippantly picking someone's brain just to like casually withdraw information. No, like I'm here because I want to pick your brain about the things you do.
It's good for you to do that too.
Yeah, it's a helpful practice for me. I like to share, and I'd say this creative output from the get-go is the only creative output that I've ever sat down to do that is purely for not myself.
Oh.
Yeah, like I felt that there was a need when the COVID lockdown first happened in Knoxville, that people needed some form of, I'm not going to say new media because podcasting isn't new, but new media about things they would have been exposed to otherwise, but this way.
Yeah.
There were no First Fridays for a year and a half. Where are you going to go see new art? You're not. But if you listen to podcasts and putting an interview with an artist in where you get your podcasts, you could still be exposed to that same local artist, just in a different avenue.
Go look them up or whatever.
Yeah, and then, if there's a link to their website, you'll hit them up and maybe you'll buy something, maybe not, but either way, you discovered said person. So that's the motivation I found within myself to do this for everyone else.
Cool.
And I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, I'm so selfless, blah, 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 because no, I sit here, I enjoy this. I get my enjoyment out of it by like running around, talking to people, doing this, because I really do enjoy talking to people. But the more important
Plus all
part,
the income from
running buckets of pennies. Buckets.
That's why they pay you the big bucks.
The big bucks. I got my okay. So everybody, all my listeners, just so you know, I got my first ad read sponsored from Anchor last week, and I put it in. I
didn't know you had that. That's cool.
Well, you can, once you hit a certain threshold in metrics, you're available to be part of their sponsored program.
Okay.
They sent me an ad. I read it. I uploaded it. They spliced it into all of my episodes. And please, in the future, know that those are a thing, and you'll hear them, and skip them if you want, but they're there. It's my first ad campaign. I really would like to make this a self-sustaining thing.
Of course, make some of your money back from the equipment.
I don't care about the barrier to entry. That's on me. I wanted to spend that money.
Okay.
So what I would like is to just have it generate enough revenue that I can pay for a dedicated studio space, or outfit my basement to be a better studio space. I would very much like not to conduct the podcast in my house, but I do, and that's sort of the grassroots level of things right now, and that's okay. But I would like to format it in the future to where it could sustain its own space. and that's really something I'm trying to push for in this coming year.
Cool.
And I'm sorry, everybody, but if you run any sort of studio space or maker studio or maker space or creative space or whatever, you're going to get a phone call, and you're going to hear me on the other end of the line asking for something. So just heads up. I'm not ashamed. This podcast needs a lot of attention, and it needs a good, dedicated, tangible physical space for it to conduct itself, and I'm looking for it. I am scouring the internet for tangible locations. So, watch out, everybody. Maybe coming to a studio near you. But we get back into the list here. Inspirations. Do you have inspirations for your watercolor, for your musical work, things that you see direct influence, indirect influence? Where do these things fall in your creative process?
Yeah, so there are a few artists that I typically list on this one, and most of them do portraiture. So Nick Runge is one of them. And I've had a few exchanges with him online. Social media makes it easy. He'll answer a question or two for me. It's really nice because he's a busy guy. Every now and then he's done a workshop in Townsend. There's a place that he'll come by. There was an Art Deco artist named Tamara de Lempicka.
I don't know that one.
She was Polish, but you would recognize her work if you saw it, I'm sure. Really iconic for that time.
Turn of the century? Or
Yeah, a little after, but yeah. You'd recognize it. The cover of Atlas Shrugged is one of her paintings.
So she's definitely got more of the industrialized brutalist sort of style versus Alphonse Mucha's really scripty,
right?
Yeah, very very filigree-ish.
Yeah,
delicate.
I like Mucha a lot, but I like her because it's so stark and sleek and stainless steel and
brushed metals and concrete.
Yeah. I like Andy Warhol. I like what he did. I almost hesitate to call him an artist. I don't know what he was doing. If your workshop's
called The Factory, then
So whatever he was doing, I think it was interesting.
It worked for him.
He anyone who plays a game like that, I think is interesting.
Well, if it's a game, he won.
Yeah. I think the Beatles are the same way. I mean, they had the goods to deliver, but they played the game too. John Lennon said, "If you want to be as big as the Beatles, you got to play the game."
There's no other way to put that.
Let's see. Iconography is another thing. I mean, it really is like ancient portraiture. So that's really big for me. Let's see. Who else do I like? Sorolla, and everyone loves that kind of stuff. Sorolla and Sargent, and the amazing portrait artists. Those are my guys in terms of artists.
Do you find those particular artists having a direct influence on your work? Do you see aspects of their work in your work, or do you just know that they're an influence of yours and your work comes out however it comes out?
Nick the most, but it's more subtle. But I think if you saw examples of all those artists, you'd be like, oh, like you'd get it. It is kind of like a digested amalgamation of all those types of influences.
I draw that question, like I split that question in two, because some people have influences that you would never know are influences in some form or fashion on their work. And then they have influences that you can be like, yeah, like you like this other dude, right?
Yeah.
Like that. There's two ways that question can go. So I like asking both ends of that question. To draw parallels in my work. There's an Australian artist. His name's Rob Mack. He does pretty big dot mandalas and geometric artwork like that, and he makes a really good, comfortable living, doing that art. And I think his workflow and my workflow are really similar in the ways that we both understand that the discipline is good for our mental health, and as a practice, it's a good practice.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And then, on the end of the spectrum that doesn't filter into my work a whole lot, I enjoy 40s to early 70s automotive culture.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that's where a lot of the
stuff.
pinstripey stuff that falls into my work. You'll see. So I grew up a car guy. My dad, he loved muscle cars. Still loves muscle cars. Like cars is one of the things that we bonded about growing up. My grandpa when I was growing up, had a service center and sold used cars, so I was always around cars and
Interesting.
slinging tires and whatever. He used to have a dirt track car when he was in college and a little after, and that was his company race car. And I work in a business, and now the business I'm employed by also has a company race car. So
cool.
I used to draw cars and stuff a lot when I was a kid, and I'm back to playing with cars now. So it's been a little bit full circle, because I can remember being a kid and be like, I would really like to design like race car liveries for NASCAR. Like 6, 7, 8 years old, I remember thinking about this, and then here I am nowadays, like making pro drift race car liveries, and
cool.
It's come full circle, and I've recently realized this about myself, and I'm really happy about it. But that is a huge influence on me that isn't very obvious. Just automotive culture in the whole, whether it comes from the engineering of things, all the technical aspects of cars and how they're put together, and why this is gusseted this way, and why it's a 4-link, blah blah blah, and then it's painted blue and it's got silver stripes and it's 2 stripes and one of them's asymmetrical, and
I feel like maybe the influence isn't obvious, but now that you say it, like I won't be able to unsee it.
And a lot of the people that know me well enough to know that I'm like a big car guy, they'll just be like, dude, come on, like that's 74 El Camino, get out of here. Like some people, my dad has looked at some of my art and be like, dude, I saw that on the hood of a Nova once, and I'm just like, yeah, you probably did. And I'm totally okay with this, because the things that distill from that inspiration down into my artwork, most people aren't going to pick it out. But if you know about automotive culture and then you look at some of my artwork, you're like, oh, did you use a Mac brush to do these lines? You bet.
Interesting.
And Mac brushes are pretty much the industry standard for anything pinstriping or coach work or any of that kind of body detailing. So,
interesting. Okay.
So I've integrated tools from those mediums into my workflow. I just don't use enamel paints that much. I have traditional enamel paints for pinstriping that I'm slowly learning and becoming more confident with, but those brushes still work really well with mildly watered down acrylic paints, and that's what I use. So I've found a happy medium between paints I like and brushes I can use. So it's been a lot of trial and error on that. But
I'm wondering, not to change the subject, but we're at an hour and a half and it's raining. I'm wondering if our audience is awake.
If
we lulled them to are they like soothed by the rain right now? And
leave it in the comments. If you're awake, leave it in the comments.
Yeah, if you're awake.
Oh, goodness. If they are indeed asleep, if you were asleep, everyone, I would love to tell you that I feel so complimented that you are asleep at the sound of my voice and the rain.
I'm being facetious. I'm not.
Yeah, it's fine. If you're asleep, then you've missed some of the episode. You can catch back up. Whatever. Yeah. You're fine.
This is just your first pass, so listen to it a few times.
Let's see. Let me try to figure out where I'm at in my mental list of things. Is your workflow, is there any part of it cathartic? I think we've already sort of covered this, but to ask the question directly, is your workflow a healthy practice for you? Is it? Do you feel better when you're done doing the thing?
Yeah. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. I know it's so superficial, but when you post it on Instagram, the likes roll in, and people, if they like it, they tell you, and that feels good. I wish I had more time for it, and so I crowbar it into my schedule. I mean, I really have to work to get it into my schedule, and so I feel like there's probably a healthier balance for me. Right now I work a really traditional Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 schedule, but maybe one day I'll be in private practice and I'll get to do 3 3 days art,
4 days work.
4 days, whatever.
Yeah, whatever the more healthy ratio would be.
Yeah, I figure out a better ratio. But for right now, I'm kind of a slave to the regular work week.
Well, as long as that's fruitful for you, it seems to be doing you okay.
Yeah, it's okay for me. I figure it out. Yeah.
Okay. The influence question I got. Oh, hey, more lights.
Yeah.
The workflow. We've been all over the map and answered most. So I can usually meander in and out of these questions.
Sorry if I've led you all over the place.
No, it's fine because I can usually get to them in conversation without like directly asking the question and being super blatant about it. I think we're at the point in the list where I ask you who you would like to hear on the podcast in the future, because if you don't answer that, I don't know who to put on the other side of my microphone.
That's a great question. Let me think about that.
I do kind of put people on the spot with that one, and I've had people freeze up on it, so don't feel bad if you don't have an answer.
Well, no. I wanted. So the only thing is, if I say someone who's already been on your podcast, then that reveals that I didn't listen to that episode.
Oh, you're. Well, I won't hold it against you. They can. I won't.
Have you interviewed Amanda Money from the Pigeon Parade?
No, but I have talked with her, and we are tentatively set to make that happen.
Okay.
So there you go. There's one.
There's a woman named Lindsay who does abstract oils, who I don't know her last name because I only know her from Instagram, but she's super nice to me.
That's okay. You can forward me her stuff.
Yeah. I want to, if I can get her name, Lindsay Sharp.
Okay.
Then if you're listening, maybe you can find her. But she does really interesting abstracts. Who else do I like around town? Those are the two that come to the top of my head, of people who I think would be engaging that you could talk to. There's Santi, who was, what's his name? Santiago. Let's see. You can put some music in the background.
Oh, wow. I have this wonderful, rain noise. And the few birds that we've caught. I really enjoy the background noise we have, to be completely honest.
I'll send you his information too, because he's a really cool guy, and
okay.
he edited one of the Pigeon Parade issues.
Okay.
And you got Kara. She's another friend of mine. Paris, have you talked to Paris
Woodhull?
yet? Yeah.
I have not. I think I've approached her about being on the show, and she said she was really busy until the beginning of the year, so I need to reach back out to her.
Well, she is really busy, so
that
probably wasn't just blowing you off.
No, I didn't expect that to be. It seemed a very genuine response,
yeah.
So I wasn't upset. I would, if it's going to be a no, I don't want to be on your show, I'd rather you just not reply.
Yeah.
Just leave it hanging out there in the DM box, and then I'll get the idea. But I generally ask. I've had a pretty good return on my asks.
Okay.
I haven't had a lot of people tell me no. I've had a few people tell me no, but the person that has told me no, that gave me a good alternative, is like, I would love to have this conversation with you without the microphone, which I'm totally up for.
Oh, okay.
But I was just like, well, that's fine. It'll still be a fun conversation as far as I'm concerned. But I won't get to share
off the record.
Yeah, I guess, which is still fine.
It's a little sus, as my kids say.
Yes, it's sus. Yeah, it's not as sus. It was a genuine thing. He just didn't want to be on record, which is fine. But he was still totally up for the conversation, which I would enjoy either way. So that one will be, I guess, a little selfish of me to enjoy that one without a microphone.
Okay.
But so be it. Arthur, we are at an hour and 33 and a half minutes. This has been a fun conversation. If you would plug your socials, tell people where they can find you, all that good stuff, and then we'll wrap it up. I'm
most active on Instagram, so that's Arthur Hatton Art. I do post on Reddit, but really it's just like a way to funnel people to my Instagram. And then I've also got a Facebook, but it's just auto update. So really, Instagram is the right place to find my stuff. I have a Patreon that you can find a link on my Instagram. And that's where people can subscribe to my close friends list, where you're on it, where I kind of share personal things and just more of my process, and then more uncensored nude artwork.
Yes, that one of the questions I've forgotten.
Yeah.
Do you have a body of work or subject matter you're really like trying to hone in on or expand upon right now? Like, I know you're working on your figure series.
Yeah,
of your own self.
Yeah, so I do some of myself. I've been doing a lot more male figures lately, just because I haven't in the past, and I just want to get a little more balance. So I've been focusing on that, and that's just been a way of just like psychologically challenging myself, and I'm just kind of. I mean, I could say a lot more about that, but I've got kind of a feminist part of myself where it's just like, okay, I'm a straight white male, and yeah, I have painted a lot of female nudes, which most artists have, and then I've really been challenging that, like, why?
Everybody likes ladies.
Women and men.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's the only answer I've got.
Yeah, well, I really started to think about that, and like, why are women kind of the object of figure art more? And maybe it's obvious, but maybe there are elements of it that are not obvious. But anyway, I've been kind of just challenging that by just making men the subject of my figure work. And it is different, and it's weird, and it can be pretty awkward. But again, why is that even awkward? And challenging that question and thinking about that has been really fruitful for me. So to answer your question, yeah, that's what I've been doing lately.
And any moonshot projects? Anything big, crazy stuff you're kind of working on? This one's a more of a mixed bag of a question. Yeah,
that's a really good question. You know, I need to come up with something, because I have done a lot of the things that I set out to do, and I've painted some people and got my paintings into the hands of some people that I'm really proud of.
It sounds like it's time to shift the goalposts.
Yeah, I've got to figure out what's the next thing. So yeah, I need to, maybe that's a New Year's thing for me, is figuring out what the next big thing would be.
All right.
Or maybe it's just like, I've hit a groove and I want to stay in this groove because I like it and it's good. So maybe that's my moonshot, is just
trying to ride the groove out.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's a good moonshot.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Everybody, thanks for listening. I'm Thomas Zachary. This has been another installment of the KAAMP. If you want to support, listen to another episode. That'd be fine. I'm not going to stop you. In fact, I would encourage you to do so in the manner that I am doing right now. If you want to purchase art by the Twisted Wrist, aka myself, that would be a great thing to do. It also supports the podcast in the way that I have tangible resources to throw at this. It puts gas money in my car so I can go interview people. It does all sorts of things that are good for this program. And, you know, if you would like some merch or sweatshirts or hats or t-shirts or something like that, let me know. I've got a line on some of those things, and I would like people to wear the stuff if they want to wear the stuff. So, y'all, thank you for your support. Thank you for listening. Get at me if you want to support the show. Otherwise, keep listening, because there's ads now, and they pay me small pennies. And thank y'all very, very much. It's been a great day. Arthur, any goodbyes?
Yeah, thanks for listening. If you're really all the way to the end here, thanks for listening. And yeah, send money. Send lots of money. This guy works really hard, and this stuff is expensive, so send money. Cash. I accept Western Union, Venmo, PayPal, all those things. Y'all are the best. Have a good night. Thank you for listening.